marketing from a branding perspective. Businesses have stories to tell to create their own brand, which then creates their specific culture, customer base, and overall market path. Our speaker today knows all about branding value and how to market it. Neil Stephen, CEO of This Is Marketing, is a creative strategist who has worked with many diverse brands and businesses to help them to understand and tell their story. We have time for discussion and Q&A at the end of the presentation, so we encourage you to ask your questions and join the conversation. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Neil. Welcome, Neil.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Good morning. It is 10 o'clock, right on. I see many of you are sneaky and you're just sitting back, no video on, just chilling. I specifically asked for this to be a meeting and not a webinar so that we could see each other. So if you can summon the courage, let's maybe, I see Norm has said hello. Hi, Norm, and hello, Maria. Some familiar faces. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Months and months ago, when all of this pandemic stuff started, I began having sort of regular conversations, which I'll tell you about this morning. But one of the very first things we talked about was just put pants on. Just put pants on. Wake up and put pants on. Start there and get your day going. It seems like that was a long time ago now. I can't believe it's been 6 months since all of this really happened. But a lot has happened in 6 months. And I think a lot of things that, if we are to look back, are kind of instructive. And so that's what this morning is about. I'm going to sort of walk you through some brands that I think are doing things well, and why I think they're able to do that. The reality is your brand's values are showing, whether you like it or not. That's just kind of the way it is. Brands aren't logos, they're not colors, they're not special sounds or slogans or anything like that. They're the way people perceive you, whether you're a giant multinational corporation or you're a little shop down the street. Brands are how you're perceived, they're your values, and especially in crisis, they're visible, very visible, whether you like it or not. So, who am I? My name's Neil. I'm your favorite brand strategist at 10:04 on August 18th. I'm the brand strategist in front of you. So, thanks for joining us. I own a company called This Is Marketing. We just turned 5 years old in April, the beginning of the pandemic. Happy birthday to us. A little bit of credentials here. This is the brand that in this business I'm sort of most associated with, A Piece by Chocolate. Our company conceived that name, conceived the brand, and worked with Tarek and his family for the whole time to bring the concept of this brand and bring the products and stuff to market and roll them out across the country. So that's the thing that everybody sort of knows. That's the client that everybody often knows about, is Piece by Chocolate. So that's a little bit of credentials. But we do other things. We work with Lot 6 on their social media and rebrand work in their shop. For years, we've worked with Oceanstone Resort near Peggy's Cove, helping them with their social and all the print collateral and sales and marketing and advertising and whatnot. I think we've advertised in the Chamber's publications a time or two with Oceanstone as well. Also work with Press Gang and Box. Box is an awesome talent management agency in the city. I think they're about 3 years old now. Stephanie Purcell is fantastic, so she's a client. I work with the Press Gang as well. Lot 6 and the Press Gang have the same owners, so we work with both of them. Working currently with Superfruit Puree. Excellent source of antioxidants, in case you were wondering. Quarter cup a day gives you all the antioxidants you need. Delicious, and it's available at Sobeys. Also work with Harris North Law, which is a really great sort of just blue-collar law firm in Larry Utech. Sarah and her team are awesome. Lots of free parking too, so head over there. So yeah, that's just some of the folks that we've worked with. We've worked with a ton of clients over the years. About 5.5 years old now, and before that I've worked in bigger agencies, all these different places and all these different gigs, and it's been fun, and it's brought me here to you this morning. So those are my credentials. So your brand's values are showing whether you like it or not. The premise of the situation that we're all in is rooted in something we talked about pretty extensively back in March and into April. And it's the theory that this pandemic has really pushed you off of a cliff. Sometimes it's helpful to have a visual cue. This is a visual cue. COVID-19 and your business being pushed off of a cliff. This is the reality. We all experience this. And back in March, what I was saying at that point was to all my clients, anyone who would listen, was that you've been pushed off a cliff, and it's really up to you to jump in the direction you hope to land. And so that makes a quick assessment required, and the ability to sort of jump and move in the direction you want to go. It's never good to be pushed. It's never good to be pushed off a cliff, but you got to try to make lemons out of lemonade, lemonade out of lemons. And so looking out and trying to figure out, where do I want to land? What makes the most sense for me strategically, where my business could land? That's what was pivotal back in March, April, and into May. So your business is pushed off a cliff. I like to think of it, the reason I mention this is, in crisis, the way you behave as business owners and as brand leaders, the way you behave speaks volumes. It says so much. That's the stuff that people will remember. You can run as many ads as you want, and some of them are funny and some of them are emotional and whatnot. But when there was a crisis, what did you do to respond? What was your action? How did you live your values? People will remember that for a very, very long time. So we're 6 months into this crisis now, and a lot of brands, and I'll show you some of them this morning, a lot of brands have done a good job of acting. But there's a whole bunch of companies, a whole bunch of brands, the vast majority, frankly, who have not. And I think the number one reason that they have not is that they don't know what they should be doing. They don't know what they should say. They don't really know their voice. And knowing your voice is the foundation of brand communications. So we're gonna explore that this morning. So I'm gonna show you a little clip here. I don't know if we get any West Wing political nerds on the call here, but this is a 45-second clip, and it's about the fall. So in this instance, the president is speaking with his director of communications about a favorite movie, and it sort of sets the stage.
Hey, your favorite movie was on TV last night.
By God, I'm 50, alive, and a king, all at the same time.
I turned it on just as they got to the scene when Richard, Jeffrey, and John were locked in the dungeon, and Henry was coming down to execute them. Richard tells his brothers not to cower, but to take it like men. And Jeffrey says, "You fool, as if it matters how a man falls down." And Richard says, "When the fall is all that's left,
it matters a great deal."
It matters a great deal.
You trying to tell me something?
No, Mr. President, of course not.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so when the fall is all that's left, it matters a great deal. And that's, you know, it's true in life. It's certainly true in business. And so we're faced with a scenario now where our actions really do speak volumes. And the way that, you know, if you think back to March and April, I don't want to trigger anyone's PTSD here, but you think back to that moment in time, no one knew what was going to happen. We didn't know about any government programs. We didn't know about anything. And we all knew that we were in trouble. And our actions in that moment, in that time, should speak volumes for a long time. And we're still in it. So there's still lots of times and lots of opportunity to really say something of substance and speak and differentiate your brand in a meaningful way. So when the fall is all that's left, it matters a great deal. So these are the sort of three scenarios that likely your business is facing or has faced in the last 6 months. Either your customers can no longer afford you because everything's changed and they don't have as much money. So spending on luxury, anything, has been diminished. Your customers can no longer access or reach you. So for a variety of reasons, your product is not something that is accessible due to safety. That's sort of the big overarching theme there. But certainly if you're in the music industry, if you're in the events, booking, sports, you know, this was highly relevant a few months ago, still relevant today. And then the third one is the customers no longer need my solution. So, geez, I was really, really relevant, and then we had a pandemic, and now nobody is interested in the thing that I do, right? So they can afford me, they can reach me, but nobody cares about me. Scenarios that most business owners found themselves in March and April, and many still find themselves in today. I'm going to go through a bunch of slides right now very quickly. With them quickly, mostly just to touch on somebody needs to mute themselves.
Pick the greater of the two, so.
Who do we got? There we go. Somebody muted, thank you. Yeah, so I'm going to go through these next slides very quickly just to sort of give you a sense of the depth of thinking that's behind all of this. I'll just say now, everyone on this call is invited to join a boot camp that I do, and I'll sort of show you a little bit here what I mean by that. But these are things that I explore on a weekly basis Maria's on this call. She can sort of nod her head probably and say, yes, he does talk about all of these things. Maria's a member of our boot camp community. She's awesome. So this is what we were talking about back in March and April and into May, which was these are the 3 scenarios you're likely facing. So for the customers that can no longer afford you, these were some pieces of advice that we gave back then. Again, I'm not going to read these things. I just want to show you the depth. For ones who can't reach you, who no longer can access you or reach you, you needed to inform them, educate them, improve, test, and improve. So what we mean there is inform them, here's our current status. Number 2, educate, explain why you're safe. Number 3, prove how you're safe. Number 4, test your proof, test your own measures. And then number 5, improve on that testing, improve on that safety every day. So we were saying that back in April and May and into June, and it's still true right now. So if customers are, if your product or brand or service is impacted by accessibility, these are the things you want to be communicating. These should be really obvious by now, but I want to give you a sense of where all this thinking comes from. So customers no longer need my solution. So you really have 2 choices in this scenario. If you're in the tourism sector, this applies to you. If you're in special events and that sort of stuff, you can adapt and find a new way to deliver your product, or you can hibernate. And there's some advice here on both of those things. Again, if you reach out to me on social media or join the boot camp, I can walk you through this stuff in very great detail and we can chat about it. But there's 2 slides here about different ways to adapt or hibernate if the customer no longer needs your solution. So I just want to give you a sense of the depth here. But this is the piece that I thought was, it was funny because to me this was second nature, but almost every business owner I've come into contact with needed to be reminded of most of these things. So a lot of business owners don't have control of all of their communications. In theory, they think that they do, like they know how to get something posted on their website. But do you know how to update your Google My Business? Do you know how to update the information within your Facebook page? Or how would you change the signage on your front door in a pinch? What about your keywords? Do you have keywords? Is your website written in a certain way with certain keywords? Are your meta descriptions done in a certain way? Your email newsletter, what are the templates that you have for that? Do they fit now? There's so many different ways to communicate that need to be updated throughout all of this. And we were saying back in March, April, May, and even into June, now is the time to get your hands on this stuff and really take control. A lot of business owners don't have control of these things. They're really good at what they do, and the marketing communication stuff kind of just happens over on the side. Now more than ever, get control of these things. And if you don't know how to do it, or if you can't do it, outsource it. Find a company. This is marketing.ca. Feel free to hire us, but there's lots of companies who can help you with this stuff. The ability to communicate quickly and succinctly right now is more important than it has been in my entire career. I've been doing this for 15 years. I've never seen a more immediate demand for instant communication and instant ability to edit and change communication. Things are happening so quickly. So you really got to be able to take control of these things. So how are you adapting? This is really the big question. I'll tell you right off the bat, aside from we changed a few things and we put up like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper on the door, most businesses haven't actually changed much. Yes, they've adapted, but they certainly haven't communicated their adaptations. We think everyone has because when we're out in the community, we see it. So when you visit Scotiabank, they have decals on the floor and the place is set up differently, sure. But as everyone on this call knows, the vast majority of business in Atlantic Canada is small business. And so these big brands that we interact with and we see every day, yeah, they've adapted, but how have the smaller companies adapted? So one thing that we suggested was begin making an adaptation list. It's a fairly simple thing to do. Sounds maybe a little bit complicated. It's not. Here's an example of my adaptation list from March into April. So the green is stuff that we thought worked well. The yellow is the stuff that we thought maybe we should revisit. And then the red is stuff that we were like, oh yeah, let's just not do that anymore. That didn't really work. And that's from May 13th to April 13th. If your list doesn't look like this, first of all, do a list. Sit down and try to think of things that you've done to adapt in your business and for your brand. What is it that you've done? It can be a little brainstorming session. If it's not a list that has more than 5 or 6 things on it, you need to spend some time really thinking about how you can adapt. Likely, if you haven't adapted at all, your business is either down or your business is through the roof, in which case you shouldn't even be on this call. Go do that because your business is through the roof. But yeah, so the question you should be asking yourself on a daily basis is, how are we adapting? How are we taking control of what's happening to us? And adaptation is all about taking back control. So when you're pushed off a cliff, it's the adaptations you make that impact where it is you end up landing, and the success of your business to restart once you do land. So a real quick look at some things that will make your customers dance. I kind of put this in because I don't want, this has nothing to do with the subject. I just want anyone who's on this call to do this if you haven't already done something to this effect. I want as many businesses in Atlantic Canada to succeed as possible. And so you need to know this stuff. First thing, so the idea here is what's going to make them dance, what's going to make your customer happy. The first thing you need to do is understand how your brand or product is protecting your customer's family, their friends, and their overall community. How is it helping? You need to understand that. Second thing, how is your brand or product safe? So how does it help? Number one. Why is it safe? Number two. And number three, why should they trust you? Why should your family, friends, and community trust you? So how's it helping? Why is it safe? And why should I trust you that it's safe? If you're not answering those three questions, you're not going to have success in this moment. You have to answer those three questions before you answer anything else. Then you get on to price, then you get on to product quality and a whole bunch of other stuff. But how's it helping? How's it safe? And why can I trust you? Those three things start there. If you don't know anything about what you should be saying, you don't know your tone, you don't know your messaging, okay, but you can fix these three things. You can say these three things. Why is it safe? How can I trust you? And how is it helping? So there, I went through these things real quickly. Now let's get into the meat of this. Your brand's values are showing whether you like it or not. Your adaptation is really speaking. So the way you're adapting or not adapting, that is what's speaking volumes at this moment. So I'm going to go through a bunch of examples of brands that have done a really good job of adapting and are speaking well. The idea here is for you to sort of get a sense of, oh yeah, a lot has happened. And also, I'm hoping you might walk away a bit inspired to begin taking the reins and adapting more in your own business. In this moment, your values are showing. Your ability to adapt is you taking control of how people see those values. Clear as mud? I hope so. So how will you adapt today? Well, I adapted. This is how I looked back in March and April on the left. And now I don't look like that at all. I got rid of all this stuff and my wife's very happy about it. Aren't you, honey? Yes, you didn't hear her, but she said from her office, yes, she's very happy. We're a family business here. So I was a little fur man back in March and April, and I got rid of it all. Yeah, so there's a little personal adaptation. But here's an example of how we adapted as a company. So as I mentioned, we launched our business 5 years ago, April, and the whole plan was to just sort of be under the radar for 5 years and then have a big party on our 5th birthday and sort of say, hey, we're here. We're a real company. You've never heard of us before, but we're here. Anyway, obviously that didn't happen. And so our thought was, how do we adapt? And what is really important in this moment? So in March, we conceived this idea, and we sort of brought it to market. So this is what we did with all the money we had saved for our big party. Nothing like showing your own commercial to people. It's great. So this is our realization. You know, we work a lot in the food sector with grocery, and so like my best friend's the assistant manager at Sobeys in Truro, and we're just very, very familiar with what's happening in grocery stores on a regular day. And so when the pandemic began, it was really abundantly clear to us, because everyone in my office has been on the front lines. We've all worked retail. It was really clear to us very early on that amongst the most vulnerable, we're going to be these people that we almost don't even think of as critical workers. And so we went through this thing as a society where we were all really appreciative of people in grocery stores. And so we were out a bit ahead of that because of our own, sort of understanding and insights. So we took the funds from the party and we bought 15 mobile signs and put them up around 15 different retailers around the city, just to say thank you and to hopefully inspire other people to sort of focus on the sacrifice that the people in those stores were making. And I show this because I'm really happy with it. I'm proud of it. But to me, this is what living your values is all about. This is what speaking from a position of brand strength is all about. Here's who we are. Here's what we're about. Here's what we care about. And in this pandemic moment, I've just been telling people my only role is really to say thank you to the people who are really on the front lines. As a marketer, I sit behind my computer. It's easy. But the folks in the grocery stores, and so they're really sacrificing. So that was a little example of how we chose to adapt here. Next. There we go. Another example of adaptation, I mentioned the Brand Boot Camp. We're now on episode 63. So tomorrow is episode 63 of the Brand Boot Camp. I remember the first slide of my Brand Boot Camp was just in Arial font, Brand Accountability Boot Camp. And then I immediately went into everything is falling apart and you can push it off a cliff. Now, look, it's all fancy. We got a proper logo for the Brand Boot Camp. We're on episode 63. And the community has grown. We have anywhere between 14, 15, or 20 people a day join us for the boot camp, and there's over 100 people on the list who come and go. So it's been really, really fun, and it's been a really good adaptation for us, and I think we've been able to help some folks. Tomorrow, for instance, we'll be doing We Help Wednesday. So We Help Wednesday, every Wednesday we sit with a business owner who needs help, and we help them understand. We ask a whole bunch of questions as a group. We put together a brief that outlines their situation. We meet as a team within the boot camp. We explore their problem, and then we invite them back the following week. We explore solutions and ideas that we've come up with, things that we're willing to do to help, and then we sort of set them out to go and do those things. And then a month later, we bring them back to sort of check in and say how'd it go. So we do that every Wednesday, and so tomorrow is We Help Wednesday with the boot camp. Again, an adaptation. The boot camp didn't exist 6 months ago. We Help Wednesday didn't exist 4 months ago. We Help Wednesday came out of a desire within our boot camp to do something to help and give back. Again, another adaptation. So it made complete sense. This whole boot camp made complete sense for me because as a business, I started my company because I wanted to create more jobs in Atlantic Canada. And I wanted to keep jobs here. And so when the pandemic started, my biggest fear wasn't that I wasn't going to be able to keep a roof over my head. My biggest fear was, oh my God, so many small businesses are in trouble. And we need as many small businesses as we can in Atlantic Canada. And so what can I do? And that's where the boot camp came from, was like, well, the right advice at the right moment could save some companies. So that's what we've been trying to do. Again, adaptation. So how will you adapt today? This is a question we ask every day on the boot camp. Here's a really good example. If you think back to bubbles, this was our first time, April 26th, it would have been April 25th when this news came out. This was the first time we were introduced to the idea of a bubble. It certainly was for me. New Brunswick came out and said, who's going to be in your bubble? You're allowed to have a 2-family bubble. And so this is a CBC article from back then. But we've all adapted in all sorts of ways. These aren't New Brunswickers, but this was an adaptation to bubble thinking and to sort of physical distancing. Down from, I think it was from the States or something, but a fun example. So how's New Brunswick going to deal with their bubble? Do this. This works. So it was a bar that wasn't taking it overly seriously, but it was kind of fun. Got to keep the humor. Then we see the canteen right just down the street from us. We're at 99 Portland Street here. The canteen is a block away, and they really stepped up. They realized that they had all this infrastructure to feed people who really needed to be fed. And so, Renee and Doug from the canteen stepped up and they began producing hundreds of meals for those at risk. And a good example of adaptation. I'll say this, pre-pandemic, if you made a list of all the really good small business owners who are great on social media, and then a month into the pandemic, made a list of all the small business owners who are doing a really good job of adapting and doing cool things, the lists would be identical. And it's not because they're geniuses, it's because they know their purpose, they know their voice, they know what they're all about, they know why they come to work in the morning, they understand their brand. Doug and Renee understand the brand of the canteen is to be a part of Downtown Dartmouth, to help elevate Downtown Dartmouth. They started at 2FIC, above 2FIC. They then worked with Bruno Construction, a great Downtown Dartmouth construction company, to renovate a whole section of Portland Street and move their business into that space. And they're an anchor piece of Downtown Dartmouth. They get that their purpose is more than just feeding people. Their purpose is community and building community. And it's evident, right? And so it was no surprise when I saw this pop up on my news feed. Oh, of course they did something like this. That's what they do. That's their brand. CAP, another Downtown Dartmouth business, they said, okay, well, we can't be open anymore, but we need to be able to communicate with one another and send moments of love and thoughts of appreciation. So they put together a greeting card and a hello, thank you card vending machine. A really, not that hard to do, but a really good example of adaptation. This blew up, sold out immediately. Great idea, great execution. They knew what their role was in the community, which was to make special moments between people. That's what gift stores are all about, right? It's little stories between each other. So they were able to keep that going. Ed McHugh, a lot of people know Ed McHugh. This is a great example of someone taking something in their own hands. Ed doesn't own a business, but he's absolutely a brand. He's often in the news as a marketing communications expert, and he's really great. And he knew that, hey, there's an opportunity here for us to take where normally his Christmas tree would be, which is on the highway there near Bedford, and you replace it with a big heart, which this happened not long after the mass shootings. And he just did a great job. So, example again. Now this put Ed McHugh in thousands and thousands of people's minds during a crucial moment and in a positive light. That's concrete, right? That you're going to remember that. If this made an impression on you at the time, you won't forget that. The way you behave in a crisis, the way you fall, speaks volumes. The Westin, they were one of the first places to do this. We saw this all over the world eventually, but the Westin, Glenn Bowie and his team down there at Newcastle came up with this idea and executed it immediately and just took a picture, and this went viral like crazy. This didn't cost anything, but they did it because they could, and it was there. What are the things in your business that don't cost anything that allow you to really say something? Matt Sims, maybe you just came from Matt Sims' broadcast or whatever it was this morning that he was doing with the chamber. I'm disappointed I couldn't check it out myself, but here is a bunch of screenshots of things that Matt Sims from Simplicity and his team have been doing since the pandemic started. Frankly, my boot camp was inspired by Matt Sims saying, the game's changed. We all need to suit up and go to battle here. And I thought, well, what could I do? He really strung that out in me, and I thought, well, what could I do? And that's where the boot camp started from. So Matt's done a really great example. If you think of, I won't go into too much detail here, but he's done a ton throughout this pandemic. He and his whole team to really try to protect as many jobs and help as many people in Atlantic Canada as possible. Mackenzie Atlantic, I should say, Matt and his team at United Sign, they started making face shields. They developed a new way. They usually made vinyl signs and all sorts of signage for cars and businesses and offices. And realized very quickly that's not going to be a thing. So they found a way to start making masks. And it was a big deal. They were going to make 10,000 masks. And the New Brunswick government bought them right off the bat. Said, yeah, we'll take those face masks. Let's do the face shields. Great. And then Mackenzie Atlantic Tools and die machine cutting, or whatever this company's name is, Mackenzie is the one that matters. They said, oh, 10,000, that's nice. We'll do 100,000, no problem. And they ended up producing well over that in the WK. Again, stepping in, understanding that, hey, we have the ability to do something here. Let's retool and let's really fill a need. So stepping up, understanding what you can do, right? Little Eden, this is a little coffee shop where remember the Halifax little hotel? Now it's a Hilton, I think, and the Two Crows Brewing is there. Anyway, right on the corner, Little Eden. Little Eden is a low waste or no waste cafe that opened a week and a half before the pandemic started. Imagine that. Just take that in for a moment. Imagine she's got a lease. She's leased this big place. She's done a bunch of renovations, and all of a sudden, a pandemic. She just opened her doors in a pandemic. So within a month, she had over 100. She didn't have online ordering. She didn't have any adaptations. She moved very quickly online, and within a month had sold over 100 SKUs online, and was sustaining herself, and is still sustaining herself. And when things were safe to reopen, she had the plexiglass, and now she's open again. I strongly encourage you to go and get one of their Danishes. Delicious. Again, just another local company. The Halifax Wanderers, this is a really good example. They were doing this before anyone else was doing this. They should get credit for it. Their marketing team should get credit for it. They understood face masks were going to be important. They sourced it, they branded it, and they made it available for people months ago. Because they understood that their whole brand is about bringing people together in celebration. And if we're going to do that, we're going to need face masks. So they were at the forefront of this. Just remember that everything you see about, buy a face mask and we've got our logo on it, Halifax Wanderers were the very first. This I thought was really, 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 really beautiful. The international tattoo, something that has happened in this province for a very, very, very long time. Joyce Michael has never missed a show. She's been 40 of them straight, and she was going to miss her first show. And so once things had sort of stabilized enough at mid-July, the organizers of the tattoo put together a social distance or a physical distance version of the tattoo specifically for Joyce. They did it at the base here in Halifax and surprised her with it. A really, really great gesture. And what it said, we know who we are. It said, we know who's important to us. We know that our fans are very loyal, and we know that this is a trying moment for everyone. And we want to be a part of happiness in this moment. It wouldn't have been easy. It would have been much easier to cancel the tattoo and just plan for next year. But someone within the tattoo took this on. Someone in a leadership role within the tattoo said, yes, put the resources towards this. Let's make this happen for Joyce. Again, the values of the tattoo are showing whether they meant to or not. It's there. You can see it right off the bat. What do they care about? They care about the people that have supported the tattoo for years. Stanfield's. Stanfield's is a Nova Scotian icon. I mean, it's been here forever, and they pivoted very early to making safety equipment, medical gowns, just almost on a dime. They just changed like that because they knew that the community that has sustained them for a very long time, they understood that that's what the community needed. So they made changes immediately to do it. And they were doing those changes and making those changes when there was a ton of uncertainty in the marketplace. Duckish, really good example. This is a natural, like a lotion stick. Duckish rolled out into Sobeys across Atlantic Canada during the pandemic. You think of all the hand washing and the disinfectant and the hand sanitizers, just brutalizes the hands. So they said, well, now's the perfect time. Sobeys was all over it. So they got their products into Sobeys across Atlantic Canada. And Duckish went ahead and donated sticks, these are lotion sticks, to a ton of stores across Atlantic Canada, so that cashiers could have them right at the till and could keep their hands moisturized and prevent cracking, which is what was a real problem in grocery stores at the time. So Duckish stepped up and did that, in part getting their product into all the stores, and then they did that. So then all of a sudden, at the tills, at the registers of a ton of grocery stores, you had, there's thousands of conversations every day that happen at the registers of a grocery store. Now you had 10 or so ambassadors for Duckish saying, oh, it's a great product. It's helping my hands. We have to wash our hands every 20 minutes here, and my hands were getting so dry. Now I'm using Duckish. It's all natural, and it's really great, right? So it's a smart move on their part, strategic, but also something that they would have done anyway. They wanted to help. So another really good example. So I'm going to highlight now Dennis Campbell. So Dennis is the CEO of Ambassadors Grey Line and Murphy's the Cable Wharf. He was a guest on the boot camp. I mentioned that on Fridays we have guests. And so Dennis was a guest on Friday, not this past Friday, but a Friday a few months ago, whatnot. Anyway, there was something in particular. We spoke with Dennis for about 45 minutes, and we had a good Q&A session as well. But there was one thing in particular that I wanted to pull out as an example of priorities and values. And so I'll let Dennis be the explainer here.
Then and now, wow, it's like I said, I've been saying all along, it's like it was a wonderful planet, and all of a sudden it was like we're in a bad dream, different planet, and not a planet any of us really wanted to be on. And like, I remember literally I couldn't sleep one night and tossed and turned and kept thinking about, oh my God, the 350 people that depend on our employment that are now not going to be employed. This is before any of the government programs, and it's horrible feeling. The weight of the world when you think of all the people like single moms and, you know, seniors that depend on this income. And so, you know, I read All Nova Scotia about 4 o'clock in the morning and saw that Sobeys was hiring 400 people across the country. And you know, I had a bit of an epiphany, and I thought, oh my God, we've got, you know, 300 pre-vetted, hardworking, great attitude people that, you know, we can employ some of those people. So I reached out to Vivek Sood, who's a good friend and neighbor. He's a senior VP at Sobeys, and right away he got it. And his HR person got together with our HR person, and within days we had staff that were, that were, you know, stocking shelves and so on. And it's not, you know, what they wanted to do, but, you know, it gave them immediate peace of mind. Again, it was before the programs came out, and gave us a sense of comfort to know that we did something good to help them. And the big question internally was, my God, you know, what if this thing, you know, blows over in a month and we need these people? And I said, you know what, it's a chance I'm willing to take.
So that's Dennis's take on things, right? So he you know, this is before there were any programs, anything, and he was just thinking of hundreds of employees and what do I do? And he was actively looking for solutions. His values, he was thinking about them at 4 a.m. And when he saw that piece in All Nova Scotia, said, oh my God, that's a perfect fit. And he acted. He didn't just have the idea, then he acted and contacted people, would have had to explain his idea, and he moved it forward and moved a lot of people from scarcity and not knowing what's going to happen, and he got them into new jobs. Now, that was all before any of the support structures were ever even announced. So a really good example. So what's Dennis been up to since? Well, he's sold out all of his tickets to George's Island now that that's open, a great safe and outdoor space where you can go and explore and be at a very low risk for COVID. He's selling Theodore Tugboat. He's going to free up some capital and do some things by selling Theodore Tugboat. And they just launched an electric powered boat, the first one approved by Transport Canada. It's going to be used for tours and that sort of thing. So, you know, it makes sense when you're thinking about the future, you're thinking about people. And he did a lot of these things that I'm just sort of outlining because he wants to be able to move and employ people and keep the economy moving, you know, and it's just a really good example of action, right? Values-based action. So then we think of like Maria Kearney. Maria owns My Home Mercantile and My Home Apparel. So, you know, you'd be familiar with Stay the Blazes Home. The now retiring premier said this famously and went viral. Well, she very quickly put that on some shirts. She already had a great distribution network and great online presence, and she was able to sell thousands of these T-shirts and raise money to go to the Strong Nova Scotia Fund after the shootings. Again, living her values, action-oriented. Let's do something. Then I think of Sean Fraser, who's also a guest on the boot camp. Now, you might know Sean, you might not. His name's getting bandied about as a potential premier candidate now. And I guess Morneau just resigned, so maybe he'll be the Minister of Finance, but I doubt it. He's currently the Associate Minister of Finance in the Liberal government. He's Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity. And he's the MP from Central Nova, I think where Peter MacKay is going to run. So we'll see what all happens there. But Sean joined us on the boot camp, and you know, he had some really good points, but the one I'm going to show you is just kind of fun, and then I'll show you some of his adaptations.
That people seem to have some respect for the government's response, but still have real serious concerns about how Canada and their business or their family will come out of this crisis. I think in terms of the adaptation question, we've been forced to adapt in a few different ways. Thank God for Zoom. We've got literally a virtual parliament operating through Zoom now, and it's hysterical when you have a behind the scenes look at when all the MPs are logged in. I have a different screen than what the public sees, and you have MPs who forget to turn their mute off and start interrupting the Speaker of the House of Commons, wishing their sister a happy birthday in the background, or feeding their cat, not realizing that the Prime Minister's watching them. And it's really entertaining because it's just a bunch of people trying to figure things out as best we can.
Isn't that the truth? That sounds like the last 6 months to me. A bunch of people are trying to figure things out as best we can. That includes political leaders as well. But Sean, you know, Sean is the Associate Minister of Finance, so he's right below the Minister of Finance, heavily involved in the crafting of a lot of programs that we now know and love, like CERB and the wage subsidy, or maybe we know and hate them. I don't know, but I certainly appreciate them as a business owner. But he was good enough to join us. I believe this interview was in late April, right at the peak of all the craziness, he was good enough to come on the boot camp and chat with us. And he did some other things too. He developed and he worked with my team actually to develop a benefits calculator. So there was a point where no one knew what benefits they were sort of eligible for, and it was very confusing. So we worked with Sean to develop a benefits calculator. You go to his website and actually answer a few questions and get a breakdown of all the benefits that you were eligible for and how to apply for them. And it worked really, really well. This is the first day it went live. He had over 7,000 visitors to his website. He might get 1 or 2 visitors to his website on an average day. And in one day, it went up to almost 8,000, which is really, really crazy. And this was just sort of a quick look at it. This went on for weeks and weeks, people using this calculator. But it spoke to Sean's values, which was, how do we help people? That's what he really cares about. He's not hyper-partisan, really. He's very focused on supporting people who are coming from marginalized communities, people at high risk. And during COVID, we were all at high risk. And so his focus was there and still is. So a good example, again, of adaptation, of embracing what it is you are all about and making change happen as a result. Then I think of Alex Rice. Alex was a guest on the boot camp. He's the president of Nova Scotia Spirit Co. They've been unbelievable. They developed a $50,000 support fund for the hospitality industry. They called it the Big Tip, which is one hell of a tip. And that really helped, not a big chunk of money, but for people used to having cash in their pockets from the hospitality space, it helped to get a little bit of cash from Nova Scotia Spirit Co. In the crux of everything when there was a lot of stuff that wasn't clear. So they really stepped up in a big way. They did a bunch of stuff. Another thing that they did is they converted their entire operation to producing hand sanitizer, which a lot of people did. But Nova Scotia Spirit Co. did it at a level that no one else did it. They produced more hand sanitizer than the rest of the distilleries in Nova Scotia combined. And they signed a deal actually very early on to sell it to Canadian Tire and a couple other retailers. So they were able to get their product out and distributed across Atlantic Canada when it was needed most, with a major partner in Canadian Tire. And of course, Canadian Tire owns other brands, which is where the product was also distributed. So a really good example of adaptation. What are we all about? Well, what we're all about is good times. What's a good time right now? A safe time. Well, how about we develop some hand sanitizer, and how can we get that out? How can we do mass distribution, just like we do with Blue Lobster vodka? Well, there it is. Really good adaptation. Then I think of Wayne Crawley. Wayne was our very first guest on the boot camp. He was nice enough to join us. If you know the name Wayne Crawley, you'll know kind of who I'm talking about here. If you don't know Wayne, I'd say Google him. He's an interesting, very interesting fella. He's been involved in a million different things. He's a good guy. But he talked to us about what I call Uncle Wayne's triangle of success, which is the bottom right is get stuff done, which he would say get shit done. Bottom left is knowledge of business. So you got to know your industry. You have to know what you're doing. And I assume if you're on this call, you own a business, you know what you're doing. But you got to know what you're doing. You got to get shit done. And then the top one is key relationships and understanding who are my key relationships in a crisis. And then he said, you really want to be ready for your magic wand question. The magic wand question is, if you meet someone and they said, name the 2 people you want to be connected to move your business or objectives forward, who would the 2 people be? You got to be ready to answer that question. And he told me this months ago, and I still don't know my answer, but I've been working at the answer. And in working at trying to figure out the answer, I've learned more about myself and more about my brand and my business than anything I've done in the last 12 months. It's really taught me a lot. What do I really want to be? What do I really want to build this business into? Really, really, really great question. And just a key note on key relationships, if you're wondering, the goal should be to have 20 or so key relationships at any given time. You probably want to engage them weekly. And then you want to have a second level of key relationships. You want to have about 50 of those, and you'd be engaging them maybe once a month, just to sort of stay in touch. So very good insight from Uncle Wayne. I would strongly encourage you to consider that and act on it. But so then it's just some, I'm going to quickly run through some other guests that we've had in the boot camp. This past Friday, we had Deanne Wright. She's phenomenal. She's a great marketing strategist and entrepreneur, currently living in PEI, but she's lived up north. She was a jam-packed hour of insights. Then we had Caitlin Burgoyne. Caitlin is unbelievable. She's a customer specialist. So she's all about understanding your customer. What she says is, person or the company that gets closest to the customer wins, and she's totally right. And so she was a guest in the boot camp too, and dropped a whole bunch of knowledge. Then we did a real fun thing. We welcomed a priest, a reverend, and a Baptist minister. Sounds like the start of a joke, but a priest, a Baptist minister, and a reverend came on the boot camp, and we explored how their congregations are adapting. 70% of over 70% of Nova Scotians fall in that one of those three categories. They're either Catholic, they're United, or they're Baptist. And so understanding how people are doing in their faith can speak volumes about how your customers are doing actually in the marketplace. We had a really great conversation with them. Again, trying to understand in our heads, how do we adapt to the scenario that we're in? We were joined by Tarek Haddad. His message was, I've been through worse, which is a really helpful reminder of just how crazy a moment that we're in. But in retrospect, we're being asked to sort of stay safe, stay home, and it's really not that bad. Again, a really good perception shifter to have Tarek on the boot camp. And then another one I wanted to mention is we had Miriam Zittner. She was phenomenal on the boot camp. She was one of our first guests, and she talked a lot about what Halifax is doing from an innovation standpoint. And if you think of Halifax as a brand, which I absolutely do, I'll say this, my business is located in downtown Dartmouth. I am proud to be a business that's in Halifax though. Downtown Dartmouth is a unique community, has all sorts of cultural awesomeness, but it is a part of Halifax. I'm proud that it's a part of Halifax, and I'm happy to say that. There seems to be some controversy around Dartmouth being its own thing. I think it can be both itself. But yes, we had Miriam on the show, and she talked about all the things that Halifax and the province are doing to be at the forefront of innovation, and just the degree of collaboration that's happening around the world to try to wrestle with and survive and thrive during this pandemic. So again, adaptation. So I mentioned all this. As a blatant promotion for Friday's boot camp. We're going to be joined by Arthur Goodrow. He's the founder of Halifax Retails. It's a giant social media platform. He's been named best blogger, best Twitter account in the city, multiple years running by the coast, and he knows everything that's happening from a retail and a hospitality standpoint. So we're going to chat with Arthur on Friday to better understand what are the realities, what's happening, what does the next 6 to 8 months look like, how bad is it going to be, and how can we prepare? So again, this is adapting, and I'm showing you all of these things to do with the boot camp because the boot camp is me living my values in this company, and I've tried for the last 6 months to be an example of the things that I'm talking about. And so having Arthur on the boot camp, letting you all know about the boot camp and inviting you all is my effort to live my own values and to show you what I care about. Real quickly, how to take control of your voice. This is where the rubber really hits the road. If I've convinced you that you need to do more and you have the ability to stand up and act and say something of value, but you're not quite sure how to do it, think of this chart. Simplify, clarify, then amplify. Most marketing happens right here. People think at the end of the clarify. What do I want to say? Okay, now I'm going to say it. I would encourage you to dig deeper, simplify, clarify, then amplify. If you want to know exactly how to do that, I'm going to suggest that you join me on August 31st for a 1-hour session. We're going to go into that in a bit more detail, and I'm going to show you a course that I'll be delivering throughout September and into October. It'll be a 5-day training course that we're going to spread out. I'm fairly certain it's fundable. That's why I had the little star, the asterisk by the fundable, because it should be. We think that it is. It should be fundable through WIPSI, but it's our first time doing it, and you never know if they'll fund it or not. If it's not fundable, then I'll find another way to do it as cheaply as possible. But it's important to equip you with the ability to articulate your own brand out there in the market. So again,
I'm just going to interject there for 1 sec. Sorry. So we're about 10-2. So I know we have a bunch of participants on there that may want to ask a question. So I just want to be mindful of that. If you do want to raise your hand, if you don't know how to do that, that's okay. Just unmute yourself. But if you want to just maybe summarize something quickly, and then we can open it up to Q&A if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries. I'm right at the end here. I think I am.
Perfect. Sorry to interrupt.
So if you're interested in taking control of your own voice, this is a good way to do it. We're going to make it really accessible for folks. It's a process called brand articulation. It's a thing. It's taught. You can read books on it. It's a process. It's what we've had the most success with here in supporting our clients, helping them find their voice. And I'm going to start teaching people how to do it. I need to replicate myself so that more businesses can do it themselves. And so that's what this course is all about. So you can register right now. This is marketing.ca. If you go there, you'll see the visual. Click on it, put your email address in. That'll also register you for the boot camp. So if you're interested in the boot camp, just go to thisismarketing.ca and sign up, and yeah, you'll be laughing. So I always end with a couple wins, and every boot camp ends with some wins. So here's some wins that I think are particularly great. This is some innovation that happened in, I think it was New York City. Just a beautiful example of actually understanding what your role is. If your role is to help people and serve them and care for them, but you're dressed in a way that terrifies them, how can you humanize yourself? And so someone in this ER had the brilliant idea of actually attaching some photos of who the person behind the mask really is. And when I first saw this, it was the peak of the pandemic and all those people were dying in New York. And it kind of brought tears to my eyes because it was just so meaningful at the time. And so I wanted to celebrate it. Second thing I wanted to show you as a win is we've really learned during this pandemic that we absolutely can control the impact of climate change and the impact of environmental devastation. We have an impact. We absolutely do. For the first time in decades, you can see the Himalayas from India. The jury is in. The verdict has been given. We have an impact. And so there, I'll get off my soapbox about the environment, but we have to pay attention to it. And then one more thing, I just found this out. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. If you like this movie, it's coming back. Will Smith and Kevin Hart are going to do a remake of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And I absolutely love that movie. R.I.P. John Candy. God love him. Great Canadian. But yeah, so another win. It's really, really important to celebrate the wins. I'll just go back to this slide here. Celebrating the smallest things gives us hope, gives us the hope required to push through the hardest things. You gotta celebrate wins in order to have the energy to push through all the bullshit, honestly, the tough things that are ahead. So if you're having a tough day, just remember, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is coming back. So that's it. That's the presentation. Happy to answer any questions or chat about anything you'd like. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. That was great. I don't think anyone will beat John Candy in that movie, but you know, they can definitely try. But John Candy was definitely the man. So I'll open it up. I'll open it up if we have any questions. Just raise your hand if you could, and then that way we can unmute you and follow it up. But as we're kind of waiting to see if people can raise their hand, I did have a question. Like, I really enjoyed a lot of that presentation. The fact that you were showing all the different types of businesses, small, large, everything about how they adapted. I thought that was fantastic. I really like the slogan, "Know Your Voice," because a lot of corporations or organizations focus on culture and brand, but just know your voice covers everything, right? It covers, you know, your culture, your brand, where you're going out and speaking to people. I thought that was great. The one thing that I really liked, though, was the adaptation list and how you use the traffic light color scheme.
Yeah.
How often do you review that? Like, how often do you update it and review it? And if something's red, do you have to go back and make it green, or what?
No, so I never review it enough. I think it's a really good motivator and reminder. So you know, ideally you're checking in on a list like that, you know, maybe every couple of weeks. So saying, okay, what have I done? And you should be able to add a couple of things. Part of checking in on it regularly is thinking to add stuff, right? And thinking about things you could do. So I always say to folks, you know, knowing where you're going is what gets you there. And if you know that your goal is to adapt, and you're regularly looking at a list of things you've already done to adapt, you'll see new opportunities to adapt as they come, versus I'm not really thinking about it, it's not top of mind, and then it's just business as usual. So on a regular enough basis that it's top of mind would be the short answer. In terms of something being red, if it's red, it's dead, in my opinion. Like, move on. Adaptation is about quick losses. Okay, that didn't work, okay, move on. If it's yellow, that's the revisit. That's the okay, this was an idea, it kind of worked, but it kind of didn't. Let's take that a little bit, and maybe we can turn it green, or maybe we can turn it red real quick, and that's okay too, and then we can move on. So yeah, that's sort of the idea behind that.
That's cool. And like, I like red is dead. That's kind of good catchphrase for that, right? To just kind of move on from it. But is it something like, I mean, when you're looking at your list there, you know, it was showcasing it back in March, which I thought was, you know, very good. Do you ever go back and kind of say, okay, this was red at this point, or do you just completely wash it from your brain and just say, moving on to the yellows and the greens?
Well, I mean, it's like anything, you know, if it deserves to come back, it'll come back. You know what I mean? Like if it,
Right.
you know, I tried something in March and it didn't work. Yeah, you know, if I see again in June, well, hold on a second now, you know, maybe that, okay, yeah, let's try that again. Red is Dead is more about it's almost quantity over quality at some point until you've really trained your brain. What I noticed more than anything, and the reason I started promoting the adaptation list, is that I was talking about adaptation, but people were not executing. And when I asked people, you know, what's the reason? They said, well, I'm afraid, I'm concerned, I don't know if I'm going to do the right thing. And that's actually way more devastating than trying something that doesn't work. You know, paralysis by analysis is a real thing. And you got to try, you got to do stuff. So the adaptation list is sort of a little cudgel to move, keep going, try things. And Red is Dead is kind of like you tried it, it didn't work, move on. What's the next thing? Because we don't want to lose the momentum of trying. But I mean, Red is Dead is kind of an easy thing to say, and it's memorable, whatnot. But you could always go back to it months later and say, well, why didn't that work? And maybe explore it again. It's like anything in business, you know. You think it's one way until you look at it through a different lens, then all of a sudden you see an insight that maybe you didn't see before and bring it back. But in terms of the adaptation list, it's mostly about volume. You want to be moving and doing things.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And I noticed that there was a few comments in the chat, like you have some big fans out there with Norm and Tom and Maria. They were sending nice comments. So
boot camp.
Yeah, and that was kind of, I noticed that there's no hands up, so I'm going to ask the last question, then we have to wrap it up here. But the boot camp, I mean, the Brand Boot Camp, love that, love the brand of it, everything about it. You mentioned how, you know, Matt Sims from Simplicity, how he kind of give you the idea of what you're doing. How do you, like, you use a lot of examples of businesses. How do you make it so that you're not, quote unquote, copying, if you will, especially where, you know, like they're coming up with these creative things, you could kind of come up with your own niche, but how do you make it so it's not seen as, oh, well, Matt Sims did that and you're just copying it? How do you kind of set that apart, I guess?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the reality is Matt is just doing totally different stuff, right? So he said, like, he did a webinar about like the changes to the wage subsidy, and he went and dug into that, and he brought in like some CPAs and different things. So that's a thing. And I often in the boot camp, I'll promote stuff like that. So if I hear about some webinar happening or whatnot, I'll promote it. Like I've promoted chamber things like this in the boot camp to let people know. The boot camp is really about getting your day going, getting yourself focused, and trying to be aware of the latest things that have happened. And so every boot camp we show an example of adaptation, but we also show at least 2 wins. And it's very much a mental thing. It's like, okay, there are people succeeding. There are people that are doing fun stuff. I can do those things too, right? And it's so for me, if we're sort of sharing content with other people who are doing the same thing, as long as the information is getting out and people are moving forward and making decisions and adapting and surviving this pandemic, I'm happy. To me, we need as many small businesses as humanly possible to survive this. So
great.
Yeah, if it gets said 50 times, then great, 50 times. Did it get done?
So we do have one more question. I just want to be mindful of time. So Norm, I'm going to shoot it over to you. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up there, but please go ahead.
You're on mute, Norm.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. No, I didn't have anything specific. I think just the whole concept that Neil supports is this paying it forward and supporting local. I think is just a positive view of life today, where we are through COVID-19. I just wanted to say thank you, Neil, for driving all of us to get into that mentality of paying it forward. So thank you, Neil.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Norm. That's a great comment. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to summarize it now. But Neil, thank you. I mean, the passion that you have for your community is definitely showing through. So we really appreciate it and everything that you guys are doing. So I would definitely strongly encourage you all to check out Neil's next boot camp. So just to wrap it up, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I hope you did learn as much as I did. I thought it was great. Thank you, Neil, and for informing us on the exceptional value brands and how we can use it to drive our business to new heights. We hope you've been enjoying our webinar series, and we're looking and now booking into September. So stay tuned for a full lineup of webinars. We're also getting back to our in-person events, including our golf day at Glen Arbor coming up on October 7th. If you're looking to get involved with the Halifax Chamber sponsorship, is a special way for our members to support us when we're planning events, campaigns, and webinars like this one. So if you're interested in sponsorship opportunities, you can always email me, chris@halifaxchamber.com. This webinar was recorded, and it will be up and available on our YouTube channel shortly. And I want to thank everyone again for joining us today, and have a great rest of your week. Take care. Bye-bye.